Welcome to the DL, the podcast show that talks about everything to do with truck repair and diagnostics for the heavy truck and construction industry. I am your host, Tyler Robertson, CEO and founder of Diesel Laptops. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the DL. I am your host, Tyler Robertson, also the founder and CEO of Diesel Laptops. I really appreciate everyone's time today to listen or watch this episode on YouTube. And today we are going to be interviewing one of our own. And with me today, I have Nate Knorr. Nate, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tyler.
So, Nate, why don't you tell everyone kind of what your position here is at Diesel Laptops? And just give us a quick overview, and then we'll kind of go into your history a little bit so people can understand who you are.
All right. I'm the product manager of everything to deal with parts here at Diesel Laptops, from Truck Parts Cross, Truck Parts Lookup, and Truck Parts Premium. I do a lot of that also.
So, I think a lot of people think of us as the diagnostic tool company, right? And now we're here talking about truck parts. As we get into this, we'll explain to everybody and our listeners and viewers why that is and why I feel that's important. But let's talk a little bit more about you for 1 second. All right. So why don't you go ahead and tell everyone what your background is, because you're not a software guy figuring out truck parts. You're a truck parts guy figuring out software. And there's a big difference there.
Correct. So where I started was in 1997. I started in the parts world. My father ran a parts business for 30 plus years, and he was looking for a parts guy for 1 month. He says, "Nate, can you help me out for a month?" I said, "Absolutely." So I don't know if the month is up yet, but we're actually still doing it. So we started out at a dealership in Wisconsin, worked there for about 2 years, 3 years. Then Cummins Great Lakes actually called me and actually wanted me to be their parts lead person at the Cummins dealership. So I went over there, stayed there for about multiple years, and ended up at in the parts world. You see a lot of times you see, hey, are you happy there? Do you want to move? And it's not that I wasn't happy. It was just that we actually wanted to see what the different worlds were. So I actually went from Cummins to off-highway place called American State Equipment. American State Equipment, we actually, that's just like it says. We sold dozer parts, excavator parts. And we actually, I did that for a couple of years, and then I went back into the truck world, what I was more comfortable with. The dealership actually wanted me to actually come back, that I actually started at. So it was kind of, you start here, you end here, you're going, it's pretty cool. So it's kind of, I've been in it since 97, and I started with you about 3 years ago, So
it's really weird. I always say this, and I joked about it when I worked at a truck dealership. Nobody ever grows up saying, I want to work at a truck dealership, right? Do you know anybody? But yet here these truck dealerships are with hundreds of employees. And, let's talk about the quality of a parts guy for a second, right? So, I've been around this too since about the early 2000s, so a little bit after you. And I've kind of been in sales and operations and parts and service and all those things. And I look at it today. When I first started, there was multiple parts guys where you could throw a slack adjuster or a U-joint or a busted airbag up on the parts counter, and that guy would get his tape measure out and a book out and just start figuring it out.
Yep.
To me, though, it seems now, as I've looked back on my career, that quality of the parts guy that's on the parts counter seems to have drifted down. And now it's, give me the VIN number or I can't help you. Is that kind of what you've seen through the years when you look back in history?
So a lot of times it is. And the reason is the higher ups, such as lead people of the parts room, are getting pushed so hard that they don't have time to train the younger generation coming into it. You try to take the time, you try to actually do the things that you need to do for your newers. And at the end of the day, you really don't have the time. But yeah, I'm one of the ones that can actually pull a tape measure out and actually do all of that. And, and they're like, how do you do it? I'll tell you later. Well, later never comes.
So how often when customers would call in, would they just specifically ask for like one or two people's names at the counter?
I would say 90% of the time.
Right. And that's because I think they've all learned, hey, there's only a couple people at this place that actually know what they're doing.
Yep.
And the rest of them, I mean, I feel bad for entry-level parts people because they really get no training. The only training like the OEMs offer is here's how to use our website to look up parts. They don't do a lot of training on parts identification or recommendations or selling skills. And I think that really shows through then when you're dealing with someone that hasn't been in it very long and they're just trying to figure it out as they go along.
Correct.
So, and you've done outside sales as well, right?
Yep.
Right?
Yep. So 7 years of outside sales.
So what's life like when you're an outside parts person, when your job's to go out and talk to your customers?
I'll be honest. I felt that it was actually easier to actually do it outside because you build a relationship with the customer and you know who you're talking to rather than picking up the phone and actually talking to them through the parts counter.
So 97, here we are in 2020. You're rolling up on a lot of years of experience. What is that? 30 years experience there?
Just about, yeah.
So through that time, would you agree the quality of that parts person has drifted downwards in terms of their knowledge and capability on the parts counter? Or do you think it's still the same as it was 20, 30 years ago?
Absolutely. I think that it is a lack of, I think a lot of it's a lack of interest. It's, first of all, the parts business, the newers in the parts business, they do not actually get a very good wage. That's the first deal. You actually got to show yourself to actually get the wage. So a lot of times I see they work there for 2 to 3 years and they're leaving. So it's a stepping stone. And again, we as the older generation in it do not actually get the time to actually train them. So they feel like, hey, why should I stay here if we're not going to get what we need? So
it's funny. I always, I've hung out enough parts counters and I knew the quality of the guy at the parts counter because that guy was delivering parts last week, right? And then they had an opening the parts counter. It's like, hey, delivery driver, you're now selling parts. Or It was a guy in the warehouse, right? Because he knew something about parts. And I don't know how many times I've been like kind of behind the parts counter doing my IT thing or whatever, and a customer will come up and start like asking a technical question like, hey, I got this problem. What do you think? And I'm like, you know what? That guy was driving a truck last week. He has no idea what you're even talking about right now. But it happens all the time. People are just searching for information and help on how to fix things.
Yep.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about diesel laptops and truck parts.
All right.
Because I think it was about 2 years ago, was it, that we moved you, because you were here at tech support when you started with us.
I started with tech support, correct.
Right. So I don't remember the exact time. I think has it been about 2 years, do you think, you've been doing the parts thing, or is it?
Yep. I'm going to say right on 2 years.
Okay. So 2 years ago, we had a conversation and I'm like, well, Nate, because I knew like tech support really wasn't your thing, right? And I was like, you know what, Nate, I think we have the opportunity here to create a solution to allow people to cross-reference truck parts that's universal for everybody, right? And even free. And I remember talking to you about it, and I don't think we planned much. It was just kind of, hey, Nate, let's go build this thing. Do you remember us doing that initially thing?
Yep.
So, we hired a couple data entry people, and we tried to call a couple manufacturers and say, hey, we want to build this platform. We want to put all the crosses on there. We want to make it free, and we're going to do it through a web and a desktop and mobile apps. And pretty much every manufacturer said no, right? So do you want to tell everyone what we did then once they told us no, that we won't give you guys that information?
Sure. So what we actually did is, like Tyler stated, we actually went to the manufacturers and said, hey, can we actually get some help building a cross-reference? Their first question is, who are you? What are you doing? Yep. And what we actually did is we actually backed up a little bit and we actually said, everybody actually gives a lot of free catalogs out. Let's actually buy a scanner and start scanning the catalogs. At that point in time, there was a lot of work behind the scenes that needed to be done because the scanners were actually doing some different things like changing zeros to or O's to zeros to or zeros to O's, 8s to B's, stuff like that. So there was a lot of we had to actually wrap up a little bit quicker to actually get this going.
So we literally hired a team of data entry people to do this stuff.
Yep.
Some overseas, some in the US. And like you said, we bought these high-end document scanners, but you were absolutely right. You kind of had to teach it like a B is a 8 or whatever it was, and someone still had to manually do it all.
Yep.
Even then, we did get some PDF catalogs that we tried to do stuff with. We got some Excel spreadsheets. We pretty much got everything we could get from anywhere, and had a whole army of people just putting data in a database. And I'm pretty sure we didn't have a freaking clue what we were doing at that time with databases or web interfaces or anything like that.
I know I didn't.
Yeah. We had no in-house software developers. So I was doing all of this with outside software developers, trying to be the intermediary between what was going on and this person, several other outside software developers, trying to explain to them what we were building and why we were doing it and everything. And, I think we could sit here for hours and talk about all the challenges and obstacles we had to overcome at the end of the day. But at the end of the day now, with our Truck Parts cross-platform, that's absolutely free to anybody. How do you say the quality of that database is and the functionality and all those things?
I'm going to say we're actually a lot cleaner than most that's actually in the industry. The reason is one part number is just a part number. We took out prefixes, we took out suffixes, we took out source codes that actually were linked to them. And that's one struggle that we actually had in the industry before we actually built this is when you go and look at a part, you would say, yes, that is the part, but there's 7 extra pages for this part.
So let's talk about that to really let all the listeners understand what the complexity was here. Let's take that gunite slack adjuster, right? AS1142. It's a common example one we use all the time. If I bought that part from International, what would their part number be for an AS1142 gunite slack adjuster?
You'd probably have a prefix like a GUN AS1142
Yep.
or a ZBR AS1142.
Yeah, it depends who you bought it from, right? So International, their prefix was ZBR.
Yep.
If you bought it from Freightliner, I think it was GN. If you bought it from, a Packard dealer, it was like GN or GUN. You buy it from Mack or Volvo, it's like 3088 dash. They put it, they put the vendor prefix. And that was kind of the problem we saw with, there's one main competitor out there, and I won't say their name or anything, but there's one main competitor out there that built this platform. Actually, they bought the company that built the platform about 10 years ago. And their problem is if I type in that AS1142 into their system, like you said, it's just pages of results. And it's all the same slack adjuster. They just listed it a bunch of different ways. And it creates a really polluted database because now you can't do a lot of the really advanced things that we can do on ours because we have a nice, clean, crisp database that has all that information in there specifically. And it even gets really weird when we start talking about cross-references. So let's talk about crosses for 1 second. So say you have OEM part A, right? And then you have aftermarket company 1. And they cross it to that OEM part. And then you have another aftermarket company that also builds the same aftermarket part, but they cross it to the OEM, but they never cross to each other.
Correct.
Right? So I believe we're calling those indirect crosses.
Yep.
Right? Do you remember when we first set up our system, we said, let's just only make the crosses that we know about. When we first told our system, hey, how many times is there OEM 1 and OEM 2 that made the same part and crossed an OEM but didn't cross to each other? Do you happen to remember how many crosses originally our computer wanted to do when we said let's figure out how many of those there are?
I thought there was 100,000s or so that were.
Yeah, it was a lot more. It actually ended up being about 30 million additional cross references our system wanted to make. But then I was like, man, we can't have people go manually figure out 30 million additional cross references. So then you're right. We said, okay, let's look at all parts that only have one indirect cross, right? Because some of them had thousands they wanted to make. And that's when your team did go through the list of thousands and came back and said, well, we went through, there was like 10,000 part numbers here and wanted to make crosses to. You guys checked, I think, 3,000 of them. And the system, and you guys were like, it's 99.9% right. The mistakes that were in there were actually due to bad crosses from catalogs that we got from manufacturers.
Yep.
So how often did you run across bad information from catalogs, PDFs, whatever it happened to be from some of the OEM manufacturers?
I can tell you if you grab a catalog, there's going to be a problem with it. I can't really pinpoint the quality that they're putting into it. I can't say exactly a number, but it is high.
Like, what was one of the problems you ran up against filters?
So on filters, I was running up that some were actually crossing air filters to oil filters to fuel filters, and I backed up one day and went, all right, this isn't right, when we started crossing them and actually building the platform that we actually built to actually look for them.
What was the deal Fleetguard did with the adapter ring or something?
Yeah, so what they did is they had a filter like a LF750, and they're saying, hey, that 750, you can actually use like a LF3000 in place, but you actually got to make like an adapter with a hose that comes down, and they're saying it's a cross.
Yeah.
Well, you need a service part, so it really...
And then you ran to some manufacturers that would bundle things together and then cross to all the pieces.
Yep.
Can you get some examples of some stuff you ran across there?
It's kind of like a stiffener plate for like a oil pan. They're saying, hey, change this oil pan plus use a stiffener plate in the place of it. So again, it's more of a service upgrade than it is actually a parts cross.
So at the end of the day, besides just parts cross information, what other attributes do you have in the truck parts database?
We got like you stated, the indirect and the direct crosses. We also have like the favorites. If you sell a certain amount of one product, you can actually favorite. You can actually go to the favorite page.
Well, we got images in there, description, VMRS codes. Yeah. So you want to talk about VMRS codes because you have a full-time person just doing VMRS coding at this point.
Correct. What VMRS code is, Vehicle Maintenance Repair Standard, built in 1970-ish. And what that is, it categories parts to actually bring it down to, let's say, how many dollars amounts am I selling for front end parts? How many dollar amount am I selling for cab parts? And we can filter it right down into that. A lot of places you see that is like major fleets is actually that's using them.
Yeah, and VMRS coding, I could go on a tangent here for 20 minutes about all the problems with VMRS coding. One of them being you could have a wheel seal or a bearing that's used on a steer axle and a drive axle or a tag axle or pusher axle, but you can only code that part number one time. You can't code it for all these. So there's a lot of problems with it, but it is a very good platform for, like you said, the major fleets and people that want to keep track of their repairs and everything. So Truck Parts Cross, 100% free. Go to truckpartscross.com. You can go to the Android store. You can go to the iTunes store. There's even a desktop app we have for it. And that's really the cornerstone. And I can say this. When I first tasked you with building Truck Parts Cross, I thought that's all we were going to build, right? Because I was like, that's just cool. We should have a free one out there. I think it'll help people fix trucks quicker. Mm-hmm. But I think over the last year and a half, we've now kind of learned that Truck Parts Cross is really the engine inside the Lamborghini, right? It's the thing in the background now that's really making things change. And you mentioned two different products earlier, Truck Parts Lookup and Truck Parts Premium. So let's talk about Truck Parts Lookup for a second and can you explain to everyone kind of a summary of what that platform is and why it's important? Okay.
So what it is Truck Parts Lookup is actually a product we built that you do not need a serial number or VIN number, engine serial number or VIN number to actually look up parts. In the world that we live in for the parts world, we think that the VIN number is actually needed. And in a way it is, but we can actually do the work for you guys and take out or research them for you and actually take out the work that is needed. And let's just say we're working on a 2015 ProStar. We can tell you the variances because we actually did the work for you. What's nice about that is, let's say you're working at an aftermarket shop and you don't have access to the OEM software. We can actually tell you, hey, this is the part you're actually looking for because and avoid making that phone call that you're going to need to make.
So I think the big myth in the industry, or the big lie that everybody thinks, is you need to have a VIN number in order to look up anything, or an engine serial number. And you're pretty much saying, no, that's not the case. You don't necessarily have to have that to get to what you're looking for. And part of it, I go back to what we talked about earlier, is that knowledge of the parts guy at the parts counter. Mm-hmm. If you go to an OEM dealer and say, I got a 2016 ProStar, I need a hood latch, he's probably going to say, I need a VIN number, right? How many different hood latches do you think International made for a ProStar for that model year?
1 or 2 at the most.
Right? So it's not like you have to have a VIN number, but everyone's been believed into that thinking. And they had to do that, I think, in order to allow these dealerships to actually look up and sell parts efficiently to do it. So like you said, what you did is you started with an engine. You started with a Cummins ISX, I think it was a 12 liter or 15 liter. And we said, let's take a CM 2250 model, which is a 2010 through 12, and let's go analyze 50 of them. And at the end of the day, you take 50 of them and we got every single part for every single one. We dumped it into a database and you come to find out a lot of parts are exactly the same, regardless of application, regardless of horsepower rating.
Correct.
Right? I think when you look back, and I think we've done this, have we looked at some really older Cummins engines as well from like the late 90s or even early?
Some M11s we actually looked at.
Yeah. Now those have a lot of different variance parts because they weren't as computer controlled, right? You couldn't have one injector do different horsepower ratings. You probably had multiple injectors.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So you look at the way of trucks as well. I think when you really look at like the Kenworth T680, right? That was the one we really started with to say, well, what's really the same on all of these? And we have a lot of experienced Kenworth dealership employees here, service technicians, parts guys, from all angles. And when your team sat down and went through a Kenworth T680, were you kind of surprised at how many parts were the same on all of them?
I did, yes. Because I probably had the mindset also being in the industry as long as we have, what's your VIN number?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, we really, we analyze a lot. We analyze thousands of VIN numbers a week, a month, a year. I'm telling you, we do the work. So if we don't think that we're actually doing 5 and giving up and saying 5 is it. There's thousands of them that go into it.
So the cool thing what we did with Truck Parts Lookup is now we have a free platform, truckpartslookup.com, where you can go on there and say, I have a 2016 Kenworth T680 and I need a front bumper, right? Or a headlight. I need a headlight assembly. And without a VIN, they can actually get all the way down to the exact part they need. Then they can click on the part number and explain to them what's happening then once they click on that part number.
All right. So what it's going to do, you're going to click on that and it's going to take you right to Truck Parts Cross.
Right.
Truck Parts Cross. Then you can find the OEM or the aftermarket equivalent to what you're actually looking for.
So on one website, I can look up parts, click the part number I need, and instantly see all the aftermarket alternatives available for me without ever actually having to call or drive to a store.
Correct.
Right. I think a lot of people, when I told them I was going to do that, thought I was absolutely nuts and it was impossible. But I've heard that about 10 times now since we started doing things here at Diesel Laptops. So before I kind of tie all this back in together, what is Truck Parts Premium? Because that was the other platform that we mentioned.
So what Truck Parts Premium is, what I think of Truck Parts Premium, it's more of an inventory-related product. We can analyze a lot of your inventories. So we can actually say, what dead assets do you actually have on your shelf that you can use that money to buy current product? Mass cross, there's actually a feature in their mass cross. We can do thousands of crosses within minutes, dumping a file into the computer system.
Yeah. So Truck Parts Premium is basically Truck Parts Cross on steroids, right? You can
Correct.
still do all your cross-referencing and all those things. But now we're giving people, and on Friday, we internally agreed to announce the 5th module for that. So we have mass VMRS. So very important if you have a fleet or an organization that wants to VMRS code all their parts, we can do that pretty much instantly. They can do mass cross-reference, as you mentioned. Mm-hmm. So they can take a list of parts and then they can cross-reference them. We have that inventory cleanup function now, part number cleanup. So customers can take a dirty list. And there's all kinds of, when I say dirty list, what that means is people have all kinds of suffixes or prefixes or mashed together part numbers. They don't know what they are. This function kind of spits back all the correct part numbers along with the manufacturer and correct description and VMRS code and all those things. Let's see, I'm forgetting the other.
And compare manufacturer?
Manufacturer compare. So that was really interesting to me. So if you go back to earlier in the conversation when I said you had manufacturer 1 and 2 and they both cross to an OEM, the interesting thing here is the OEMs do that. So let's take the shift knob inside of a truck, right? If you go to the international dealer and want to buy that shift knob, they probably have it under their C91 captive international part on the shelf. But who actually makes that shift knob?
Fuller or Eaton or,
Right. But then they also rebrand it and sell it to Mack and Volvo, and they put it under another part number as well.
Yep.
Right. And then you have aftermarket companies that are making the same thing. So the really frustrating thing in the truck parts industry is you could be the international dealer. You could be out of that C91 part. And the Kenworth dealer down the street might have their OEM part sitting on the shelf, and that guy could get going today, but nobody knows to cross all those things. So customers end up having to get special ordered or can't find their part or whatever it is. And I would even furthermore go another step to say on that slave valve, on that shift knob valve, if you actually get the retail price on all those parts, there's probably quite a variant between the Eaton number, the aftermarket, the Kenworth number, the international number. So a lot of times people could buy the same part under a different part number somewhere else and save themselves some money. But that manufacturer's compare is really unique. And I go through that story because I did one on there that should make no sense at all. I was like, show me every part that Kenworth makes that is the exact same as, I think I did Mack and Volvo. And lo and behold, thousands and thousands of part numbers are the exact same thing because there's a middleman in there that's selling the same part to both sources. But nobody's really been able to lift the veil on that until we have.
And I think another, just to hit base on that, what I think is a nice feature is rather than letting the customer walk out your front door and not helping them and going to the next competitor, you can actually keep them there and send one of your warehouse guy down to actually grab that part and say, I'll have it here in 5 minutes if you want to just sit in the break room, or I'll come get you. Because if you imagine how many parts guys just say, I don't have it, and just don't go the extra step to actually get it.
Yeah, I can order it.
How many thousands of dollars a week are you sending out that front door? I would actually use the heck out of it if I actually had it.
So, and you touched on the other most important feature, I think, of Truck Parts Premium, and that's the inventory analysis. So as Nate was saying, it's a really cool tool because it does two things. One, a lot of people that stock parts don't realize they have the same thing on the shelf under 2, 3. We even saw one guy that had the same part 4 different times in his inventory and didn't know it.
Yep.
So it gives you, like you said, dead capital. I use the term frozen capital because everyone that manages an inventory knows they got some wasted capital sitting on the shelf. They'd rather have it turned into cash. And this report pretty much just says, here's the exact part numbers. And the other cool thing it does is the margin analysis. So if you have a high quality manufacturer A, high quality B, and you're selling one for 120 and another one for 90, why are you doing that? Why are you not selling them both for 120 and trying to make more margin? And I typically see when I've worked at dealerships and talked to people, they typically don't go down to the item level to figure out their margin. Now, Amazon, Walmart, Target, those guys are down to like the individual item by time of day, knowing how much they can charge for those things. And then you go look at someone like a truck dealership. They usually just say, oh, every part we buy from this vendor, we're going to mark up X percentage. And that's not the right way to do it because you could make more money on some of those parts inside that manufacturer compared to the other one.
Correct.
Right. So Truck Parts Premium, though, definitely not a free feature. This is a paid one. We got to make money somewhere, somehow in this company. So truckpartspremium.com. I don't even know the pricing roughly off the top of my head. Do you happen to know it? I know Jamie's mainly doing our selling for us.
Yeah, I think it's $3.99.
$3.99 a month for a for one user on that platform.
Correct.
And the cool thing with inventory analysis is you could actually go to your customers and offer them to do the inventory analysis as well. That would allow you to provide some more value add to your customer. As an outside parts guy, I think anytime you can offer more benefits to your customers, you tend to do a little bit better on the sales end. Would that be a fair statement?
Absolutely. What it actually is there is rather than saying, hey, what filters are you using? Because that's what a parts guy actually does. I would probably blow people's minds going, hey, can I do an inventory analysis for your parts? And they'd be like, what are you talking about? Let's talk.
I mean, I think for any outside parts guy that goes into a customer that buys or stocks, especially stocking parts, and you went in there and said, look, Mr. Customer, what I want to do for you is I think we may have some obsolete inventory here. You may have some inventory that's overlapping. You may not have the right products. There might be better things that are, less cost effective or easier to install or better lifetime value. Let's do an inventory analysis. Let's take a look at what you got and let's come back to you with a couple propositions. And I think you are miles above the prototypical parts guy that is mainly focused on walking into a store. Hey, Joe, do you need anything today? You got any cords to return? Any warranty? Nope. Okay, I'll be back tomorrow. Because that's typically what you see out of parts guys today.
Yes.
Right. So Truck Parts Premium, if you're interested in it, just head to truckpartspremium.com. You can watch videos. You can get more details on all the functionality that we have there. But I want to kind of tie all this back together, because these are really cornerstone things of what we're doing. And we talked about it earlier. Truck Parts Cross is that cornerstone that allows us to do Truck Parts Premium. It allows us to do Truck Parts Lookup. And there's another one that it's going to make its way into here, 2 more actually, very shortly. So number 1 is Vin Decoding. And, people, again, we're kind of like, that's crazy, you can't do it. But we have our own Vin Decoder here that Jeff makes. And Jeff was back on episode 1, so we'll get him back on here eventually. But we have a Vin decoder where we put it in a VIN, and we do what everybody else does today. Here's your year, make, model, engine, those types of things. However, if we know your make of your engine and your model, and we know your year, all of a sudden I have Truck Parts Lookup that you've built, and now you know a lot of stuff based off just the year, make, model, correct?
Correct.
Right? So why not, with the Vin decoder, tie it together and have a Vin decoder that shows you, here's all the filters you need for your engine, Mr. Customer, right?
Yep.
And we tie in Truck Parts Cross right into the Vin decoder. So now not only can I see the OEM filter number, but I can instantly cross it to everybody else in the aftermarket spot as well. So beyond filters, Nate, what else do you think we could possibly do with the Vin decoder to put some more information in there besides just filters?
I think we could actually bring it back to transmissions, bring it back to suspensions, bring it back to trucks. We could do a full range of the whole complete truck.
I think we're putting all the pieces together. You're absolutely right. And I see us putting the pieces together. If we did filters, why couldn't we do injectors?
Correct.
Why can't we do water pumps? Why can't we do the fan belt, the turbo, the cylinder head? All of a sudden, you're kind of like, wow, there's a lot of stuff we could actually do here. And I know a lot of you, if you're really into this, you're like, how could they possibly do transmissions, right? There's so many transmission models. Well, let's think about it. If you bought a medium-duty international truck, a Durastar with a Max Force DT or whatever they're calling it now, how many different transmissions did they really put behind that thing? Not that many, right? If it was an Allison, which most of them are, there was really only 1 or 2 models, and maybe there's an Eaton 6-speed in there or something of that nature as well. So it's not like there's an infinity number of these things. Manufacturers through the years have gotten real good about not allowing a bazillion options for every single truck to get built. And I think that's helping us in the long run. So the other exciting thing where we're going to be using Nate's information here has to do with fault codes. So again, what is fault codes? And again, this is me tying it all back together again, because I'm a huge believer that you need 4 things to successfully and efficiently fix a truck. You need to have a great diagnostic tool. You need to have repair information on how to fix things. You need to have training. And again, these are all things Diesel Laptops offers. You need to have live humans to talk to. And part of that repair information, I include parts information, right? If we can save a technician from actually having to pick up the phone or stop working and go call someone to figure out what part he needs, we just save 15 to 20 minutes. Would that be, what would your estimation be on how long, when someone's like, I need this part, I need to call somebody, I need to go find it. How long do they spend finding and looking for that part?
At least 20 minutes.
Right?
At least 20 minutes.
On a good day, right? That's if you don't get voicemail or inexperienced parts guy, or you have to call 3 or 4 different shop or repair facilities.
I'm going to say the average is probably 45 minutes from the time you place the call to the time the parts guy comes back. Because if the customer's got to wait for the parts guy that's actually helping the customer or in front of him, you're going to wait. You're going to say, hey, Mr. Customer, I need to call you back. And it's going to be about 45 minutes.
So I'm going to give everyone a preview of what's coming out by August 1st, because that's the deadline I set the line with my engineering team last week, is we already have a platform called Truck Fault Codes. We have every fault code that it possibly exists. It's on a free platform, truckfaultcodes.com or the mobile app. And in that repair information, we specifically tell you by fault code, you have fault code XYZ, you need to replace parts 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like it's one of those things that could cause that fault code to exist. So the real cool thing now is your team will actually be putting the OEM part numbers right into our repair information that will allow people to see, I have this fault code. Oh, I need an EGR valve. Here's the OE number for it. And by the way, I can click it. And what happens then, Nate?
Then you're going to go to aftermarket or OEM,
right?
or other manufacturers that are actually closer to you.
So when I talk about diagnostics done right, that's really what I'm talking about, is putting all those pieces together and allowing people easily and seamlessly to figure out the exact part number they need. And eventually, I can tell everyone, eventually the next step is how do we help customers fulfill those orders quickly and efficiently? And that's really where we're going with this whole thing, is there is a lot of truck parts sold every single day. We intend to fully make free open platforms that allow people to look up parts and do those things. And I think that's the real big winner at the end of the day, is if we can save that technician time and not have to stop working. There's already technician shortage going on. Let's not make it worse. Let's make it better by making that guy more efficient. Fair statements?
Yep.
Absolutely. All right. So with all that said, just to recap, Nate, give them the 3 platforms again, and what are the websites for them?
Truck Parts Cross. You can find that at truckpartscross.com. Truck Parts Lookup. Find that one at truckpartslookup.com. And then truckpartspremium.com. You can find Truck Parts Premium.
So again, super excited for this year. We are going to start mashing all these things together and giving the world solutions I think have never been done before, or even thought of before. And people are like, Tyler, why do you say this stuff ahead of time? It's not even out there yet. Someone's going to copy us or do whatever. I think we're already like, we're past the hump, and we're on this stuff's happening, right? So I know how long it took us to do it. I consider ourselves pretty efficient and pretty smart and have some really experienced people here. So if somebody else wants to try to do those things, good luck. I got a couple year head start on you, and our pace is definitely not slowing down. It's definitely accelerating. We're still adding people to your department, and this thing's on like Donkey Kong at this point. All right. So, Nate, did I miss anything through this whole thing?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, Nate, I just want to say I really appreciate having you here at Diesel Laptops. There's no way we could do this without employees such as yourself. You do a great job managing your department. You've never been in charge of software and products before. You've done a marvelous job figuring it all out and working with everybody here. So, with all that said, again, I will call this an episode. I really appreciate everyone's time. And just remember, it's just not diagnostics. It's diagnostics done right.